Hi, everybody. My name is Louisa Higgins. I'm the Arts Administrator for Riverside County Office of Education. Welcome to the last in our Summer Arts webinar series. So it was a series of webinars that we put out just to have some interesting and engaging topics during the summertime. So we did something on creativity and well-being, which was really looking at mental health and as it relates to arts and social and emotional learning. And then we did one on STEAM. I guess that was like 2 weeks ago, and that's really picked up steam. You'll find these on our arts webinar page after the fact, and like the STEAM one already has 45 views. There's kind of a life after the actual webinar for them. So today's group, and I think people will start coming in as we go along, is just really an interesting and diverse group because we have special ed teachers, STEAM teachers, ceramics, elementary, music, dance. We have a board member, and we have people joining us from all over the state, so our own county, and then we have Inyo, Santa Paula, Alameda, Monterey, Shasta. So it's really neat. I think it's a neat community that we have and sharing these experiences. So this is a very rather a short lecture with a few process questions and a couple of videos. But I got to thinking about, when do we ever talk about the arts and education? So the history of the arts and also the history of arts and education. And I thought that might be really meaningful if you didn't experience that in your pre-service work, or for new teachers coming into the field, or maybe just, a brush up. So that's what this is kind of looking at both those ideas, the origin of the arts and also the origin of arts in education. So my first slide, so the history of the arts. And then of course I have, what do they call it when you have like little slides, different images, different art images, and that's just visual art. It just goes to show you what a variety we have throughout the ages and through different cultures and traditions. So what is the oldest visual art? And when we get to the end, if you have like different knowledge about this or different take on it, you can share that with the group. But in doing research, the oldest work that they found, in the caves and so forth, goes back 40,000 years. So the Upper Paleolithic era. And it's possible that it might have come along earlier, the visual art, and then we just don't know about it because we haven't found it yet. So some of the examples, these are two of them that were found in Spain and in Indonesia. I think the one on the left is really interesting because if you know anything about graffiti or spray paint, it almost looks like the hands are stenciled and then paint was applied on top, but probably it was dusted or applied with some sort of brush, whatever they had as far as tools back then. And it's an interesting piece because, what is it signifying? It certainly signifies we were here, but is that a hopeful piece, or is that, like arms reaching up, crying out? Not quite sure, but it certainly is meant to signify something. And then on the right, you have a prehistoric painting of a buffalo type animal. And also if you look to the right corner, there's like a deer or an elk. And so that's pretty interesting because nomadic tribes that followed their food, in order to survive, what was more important than the herds that they were following and relying on for sustenance. So they created art around that. So those are some of the earliest origins and examples of fine art, visual art. So then when do we begin to dance? And so dance is interesting that it's part of ceremony, ritual, celebrations, entertainment to this day. And since before civilization came along. And so archaeologists have been able to go back about 10,000 years to find pieces of artwork that show dance happening. And so that they have found that in India and Egypt going back and depicting 3300 BC. And so here are a couple of artifacts for ancient dance. So you have a Greek figurine that's mid-pose, and then you have something that was found in the Bhimbetka rock shelters in India showing a different style of dance. Moving on to our third art form, theater. When did theater emerge? And when we say theater, we mean that developing the theater as a separate activity. And can you mute everybody for us? There we go. I'm hearing a little back. So it's a separate activity. And so that's been around in classical Athens since the 6th century BC. And then, of course, it's flourished around the world since that time. So here are a couple of depictions. Up at the top, Sanskrit theater. Down at the bottom, Hamlet taking place in the late 1700s in Europe. When did humans start to make music? Of course, music is universal and it's considered the universal language. And so with music, they feel like that was, as soon as humans started dispersing around the world, music followed. And so they trace the origins really back to Africa, where some of the first known life has been documented, and then various instruments that developed along with that. And so here's some various music makers from very early on. So an Egyptian instrument up the top, and then there's Greek art featuring a lyra, and it looks like a flute, and then a Roman flute there at the bottom. And then finally, the newest one, and you might not be aware of this, media arts is the newest art form that's been formally recognized as one of the 5 disciplines. And so it had to wait for technology to come along and develop. So it is things that have to do with computers, video, internet, podcasts, film, and so on. And so those have been with us only since about the 1830s. And here's a couple of examples. So it's our newest art form, podcasting on the left, and I've gotten into podcasting over the past 6 months. So I highly recommend it. And I also commute a long way, and so I listen to podcasts. It's an interesting way to get information. And of course, film. That's an early picture of film taking place when it was silent films. So in summary, 4 out of the 5 art forms, art, music, dance, and theater, have been around for thousands of years, just almost as long as we have been around. And then 1 of the 5 art forms was born with the advancement of certain technologies. So in the past, it was tribes or the church or patronage that was really driving what was happening with the arts. So it was part of the fabric of the civilization, or it was the purview of the wealthy. So in that scenario, the church is funding, commissioning music, funding building, funding artwork. And then also you have the royalty and wealthy people as patrons of the arts. And of course, that part continues today. I just saw something about Barry Diller and Diane von Furstenberg, who spent $250 million to create Little Island in New York. And if you haven't heard about that, you should look it up. It's just a really beautiful place that has outdoor spaces and performance spaces. And they gave it as a gift to the city for public use. So just a quick reflection question, and you can go ahead and put that in the chat. Why do you think humans make art? And so I've just, quickly gone through all the different ways that, humans have made art throughout the ages. And why do you think that is? And of course, unfortunately, my chat doesn't seem to be up on the screen, so I'm not going to be able to read through that, but you can share it with one another. But go ahead and take a moment to think about that. And then I'm going to move to the next slide and show you what I came up with in my research getting ready for this. So here are some of the reasons, and they may go along with what you had in your mind or what someone else had to say in the chat, but ceremony, culture, tradition, self-expression, creative expression, beauty, that's very important to me, the beauty of the artwork that you're taking in, could be connected to your faith, could be emotional, could be a legacy, something you're leaving behind to those who come after us, could be storytelling. And that's by no means exhaustive. There's many more, of course, and you can share other ideas with your colleagues online. So here is an example of that was captured in a film. I was going to say Good Will Hunting. That's not right. It's Dead Poets Society, and the students are asking their English teacher, why do we read and write poetry? Which really speaks to the question, why do we make art? So let me go ahead and share that.
We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "Oh me, oh life of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, oh me, oh life?" Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?
I don't think I've ever heard it said better. We're humans and we're here, and art encompasses life and identity. And he refers to life as a play, and what is your verse going to be? So he's referencing theater, and he's referencing music, and it's like the other, I believe it's Shakespeare, all the world's a stage and we are but players. So that's a really great way to put it. So transitioning into education and what's happened with the arts and education. So compulsory education, which is the idea that everyone should have an education that was mandatory and not optional, became law in 1852. But if you are someone who's over 50, you can attest to the fact that when we were going through school, there was much more happening in the world of elementary as far as art and music being accessible as part of the curriculum, just like a normal part of business, where it is very much not commonplace today, except in some districts, which have really chosen to focus on that. And so when did those things begin to change? If you don't know this guy, he's Howard Jarvis. And I remember in the 70s, all of the discussion around property tax and how things were funded. So provisions for arts education became limited and at the discretion of the state because of that. And so it became local schools, school boards and districts were where the decisions were made as to whether arts education was provided. And then, of course, we went through a series of budget cuts. So I've been in education for approximately 30 years. And just in the time I've been working in the arts, which is about 15 of those years, I've gone through 2 major recessions and budget cuts. And I can think of one year where our district had about $60,000 in funding, and the state swept that funding back. And I had to cancel everything and really rely on partnerships and the kindness of strangers, as they say, to keep the programs going until the next year. So when fiscal crisis happened, it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. Then districts decide, oh, that is not the most important thing, and we can go ahead and cut that. And so too often that happens. The other thing that happens currently is we'll offer a field trip to students and call that arts education. And while I am in favor of field trips, and I think there should be as many as possible, as many as fundable, that doesn't take the place of having regular curriculum in the school day available, particularly to elementary students. So over time, there has been this slow realization of importance. And ironically, the pandemic and the school closures kind of made that happen a little bit faster, because we've been able to make some correlation in data between academic performance and certainly around social and emotional, and also sociocultural. Those are the 2 things that really happened in the last year, because social emotional, we realized that we needed to have a way to connect with students and have that sense of belonging that we were missing. And the arts is a brilliant way for that to happen. And also sociocultural. The arts, and I'll talk about this in just a moment, is just really a way to bring culture into the school day naturally, where it's more difficult in other arenas. So there's a couple of brilliant guys. I love both of them, Neil deGrasse Tyson and David Byrne, just talking about the importance of arts education.
There's a big issue, probably in other places in the world, but we feel it a lot here in the States.
Sorry about that. Take 2.
There's a big issue, probably in other places in the world, but we feel it a lot here in the States. The funding for arts education is always under stress. And the school boards are wondering, do we cut the art? Do we keep the science? And there's tension. We know this. And I brought that up with David Byrne, and he had strong views on that as well. Let's check it out.
In order to really succeed in whatever, math and the sciences and engineering like that, you have to be able to think outside of the box, and you have to be creative problem solving. And the way those disciplines are taught is not totally creative. The creative thinking...
Not at all.
Not at all. It's more like, this is this, this is this, this is this. The creative thinking is in the arts. A certain amount of arts education doesn't mean that your ambition is to grow up to be a painter, but you can use that kind of thinking and apply it to anything else, business, engineering, science.
And be better at it.
And you're better at that. You succeed more and you bring more to the world because you have these abilities that came from outside of your discipline. So bringing different worlds together has definite tangible benefits, and to kind of cut one or separate them is to injure them and cripple them.
You know, I basically agreed with everything he said in these interviews. I mean, he's a deep thinker, he's creative, he's educated, and so his thoughts they're put together in ways that really resonated with me. When I think of culture, what do I think of? I think you visit other countries and then they show you what it is that makes them them and not you. And in almost every case you do this, you are looking at their art. You are looking at their architecture. You are looking at aspects of their civilization that has been empowered by science and engineering. And so for anyone to say, let us cut art for anything else, suppose they did that back in Renaissance Europe. What would Europe be without the support and interest in a thriving culture of art? As we readily spend money to visit these cities and go to their museums, to turn around and say, now I'm going to cut the art budget here, that makes no sense to me. And it may be that science and art, which we know sort of go together, the arts and sciences are colleges of institutions. It may be that art and science thought of in that way are the only true things that we create that last beyond ourselves. Everything else comes and goes. The leaders, the politics, the economies. So am I biased? I don't know. But what I do know is if there is a country without art, that's not a country I want to live in. If there's a country without science, you're living in a cave. We measure the success of a civilization by how well they treat their creative people.
I think that's really a brilliant clip. And he's talking about the importance of the arts for creative thinking and teaching that to students. And I love the thing that David Byrne says, if we don't teach the arts, we actually injure the other subjects. They're lesser for it. And also the part about if you go to another country, what makes that country them? What makes them them? It's the arts that they have. And he gives a shout out to STEAM, as you would expect, because he is a world famous scientist. But he also mentions the arts and science as the things that we create that have a life beyond us. And so when you look at that ancient work that we're looking at that goes back 40,000 years, it's what was left to show us that humans were here. We're here. And so that begs the question, is an education complete without the arts? And there's some misconceptions that people don't realize that, for one, arts are in fact core curriculum, and they are part of Ed Code. There's Ed Code that exists that mandates that the arts are taught beginning in kindergarten all the way through. However, it is an unfunded mandate. It does not tend to be regulated. And the arts have their own standards, and they have a framework, both of which just have been updated in 2019 and 2020, and they're aligned with the national standards. So, you have to ask yourself, as a parent, as an administrator, as a teacher, would it be okay if we just suddenly plucked out math or science or social studies? And if the answer is no, then why would we do that with the arts? So where are we now? What's happening now? So within Riverside County, for instance, about a half dozen districts have invested in hiring an arts teacher on special assignment, TOSA, or a coordinator. And that's what I had done formerly before I came to the county. And so that person's job all day long is to run around and shepherd and create and monitor and give a life to arts programs. That's a really important step for districts to do. A lot of districts are also doing strategic plans. It's really hard to have a plan and act on it unless you have a roadmap. And in fact, my first job at the county, like in year one, was to create a strategic plan for the county, which in fact I regularly refer to and move on. Arts Now Communities, I have their logo up here. That is from the California Alliance for Education, which is joined with Create California, and they create advocacy groups around districts and counties. Riverside County and also San Bernardino will be starting one next year that are county-wide. And so we can't underestimate the power of school boards. They are the decision makers with budget in a school district, parent teacher organizations, which have a lot of power to drive what happens in their schools, and also the partnerships of arts organizations. So something to recognize depending on where you are in the overall scheme of things. So I was many years in the classroom in elementary, and then when I moved K-12 into the arts, I started to really understand what was happening in middle school and also high school. So one of the issues that we have is the coverage for the arts is very light in elementary, if at all. And so we really need to get after that and really work with elementary teachers to integrate the arts into what they're doing, so it has a beginning there. The coverage in middle school is kind of medium, because that's not something that the principals are mandated to have. And so a lot of times you'll find it on a wheel where there'll be like a section where they'll get a taste of something. However, it's relatively high, moderate to high in the high school, because if you don't know this, it's part of the A through G requirements. So if you have a student that wants to apply to Cal State or UC, they have to have had X number of years or X number of sections of the arts to graduate. So that's the reason it's there. But the data dashboard that we have for this kind of data in Riverside County shows that only 40% of the students have regular access to the arts. So you can see I have a mission there, and it's one of the reasons I came to the county is to really push that number upward, because it's not acceptable to have only 40%, right? So then what are our whys? So for me, I came into the work in the arts for the sake of the arts themselves, the beauty of the arts, the power. I love every single one of them, and I think everyone should have access to them all the time. But over time, in the 15 years I've been working in the arts, there's some more specific reasons that I'd like to point out to you of why the arts belong in education. So first of all, you know, we're preserving our story and we're passing it on to children and to students. And so if we think back about those ancient artifacts I was showing, you know, we're telling stories about our past and our history, and we want students to have access to that. We want to provide that for them. The second reason, this hit me really hard when I moved into the arts and was dealing with, you know, poverty rates, or we had Title I schools that were like 85% Title I, is that it's not equitable to offer students in poverty less. They actually need and deserve more. And so we want a very rich curriculum and learning environment to offset some of the things they haven't had access to. So the arts is really part and parcel of that. So poverty is one of our challenges and one of our reasons in education. Second language learners. This has become really important to me over time. And in fact, LA County Office of Education is doing some powerful work around the arts and second language, combining those standards, because it provides an on-ramp for students who are still learning the language. You can still be successful taking a dance class or doing art before you've mastered the language. And so that success and that joy and that fun, being part of school, it really engages students and keeps them in instead of being discouraged and feeling like I can't do this, so there's no place for me. Again, that sense of connection and belonging that comes with the arts. I would also suggest to you that it's part of anti-racism, because when you teach the arts, it's part of what we do in the arts to present various cultures in music, in dance, in theater, and so on. It's very easy to make that present in a way that it's not easy to do in other subject matters. And so to include diversity and cultural relevancy in the daily teaching of the arts, that's part of it, and it's important work. I just want to give you a current case study, because I don't want to talk just in generalities. This is something that really happened here in Riverside County. So several years ago, the superintendent at that time, Dr. White, selected a school, and she wanted to offer them arts enrichment that the county would underwrite in order that they could look at the data over time. And so we started those initial conversations, and to be honest with you, it was very awkward, because it was kind of like an offer they couldn't refuse. Like, guess what? We're coming in and I'm going to set up the art program. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. And so the principal was very patient, and I just kept telling her, you know, trust and believe, it's going to be good. And so we were all set to start last year, 1920 school year. And then of course the school closures came along and we had to convert to an online model. So we decided to do the program anyway. And we were going to start a 3-year rollout. So we're going to do K2 and then the next couple grades, because she goes all the way through 6th there. And we decided to do all of the grades based on how it was going, because the attendance approved, behavior, the GPAs, all of that continued on. So next year she's doing the whole school again and adding a STEAM component. And so here are some slides that this particular school put together. And I love this piece because they actually asked the students, what do you think? And from now on, I have learned every program I do, and they're mostly high school programs, I'm going to ask for feedback from my clients, which are the students. So if you look at what the students had to say about VAPA, it makes me feel brave and not shy. It makes me feel like I want to come to school more. Bingo, that's that student engagement. It's fun. We want the students to be there having fun with their learning. I can express myself. I feel smarter. I love this, makes me feel like me. It's kind of like what Neil deGrasse Tyson said, what makes them them. Help me speak up for myself and others. So it creates poise, you know, that success. It's true self-esteem, right? It's not patting someone on the head and telling them they're good. They actually know they're good from the skill that they've developed. And then the teachers, as I mentioned initially, you know, it was kind of put on them, as oftentimes happens. You know, you're given a program, or your principal says we're doing a program. And so they went from ambivalence to really seeing the connection. So writing and speaking skills were happening. Oops, sounds like we have a mute situation there, Rebecca. The second teacher said they connected literature to acting. And so that really made English language arts come alive and make stories come alive. And then the last one, notice that the theater acting process was tied into reading skills. So inferencing, intonation, dialogue, word meaning, and usage. And so, you know, that reference to if you don't teach it, you injure the other subjects. The flip side of that is if you do teach the arts, you are influencing those other subjects and making them stronger. And they did 300 surveys. I love this, 300 responses. And this is what the students had to say. So 82% said VAPA makes them want to come to school more. Again, I remember 30 years ago being in my teacher pre-service classes, and one of my teachers saying the number one predictor of how well you'll do in school is not how smart you are necessarily, it's how much you like it, how much you like being there. So that's a huge number. 87% responded that they liked the physical movement because there was dance and acting happening. They liked the Flipgrid and Google Classroom. Of course, kids are so adaptable to these new technologies because they were born to them, unlike some of us older folks. And then 95% of the students said that they learned new content. So I thought that one was kind of amusing because I'm thinking maybe the other 5% didn't learn new content because they're already enrolled in dancing or acting classes, but who knows on that one. And then these are the teacher results. So 100% of the teachers, okay, 100, all of them. And this is like 36 teachers. And remember, some didn't want to do it, some were lukewarm about it, and some were on board, but they believe it increased students' overall engagement in the distance learning. And 86% agreed that VAPA had a positive impact on more than a quarter of their students who had trouble getting to school. So I think that's just really significant numbers. And this is happening right now. And they actually loved the program so much they rolled it into summer. So the future of arts in Riverside County, and I hope other counties as well, is we are busy creating networks with districts, arts teachers, and students. Over time, it's part of our strategic plan. We are going to really concentrate on professional development on arts integration for elementary. So we have an Arts Lift conference that's coming back that we had to set to the side for a minute, but it's back. Creating understanding and trainings around the arts standards and frameworks. So it's really important for especially secondary arts teachers to really know those because we deserve to be taken as seriously as any other content area. And we have all of that to work with. Fourth, we're going to create quality professional development to arts teachers. That actually went really well online. We had lots of offerings this past year, and we'll do some in person moving forward. And then, as I mentioned before with the Arts Now, involving arts organizations as partners and parents too, like our Easy Arts for Everyone videos, those are really geared towards parents because we want our parents to be on board and requesting arts and expecting arts for their students. So reflection question, as I told you, I can't really see the chat until I get out of screen sharing here, but just ask yourself this, please. You know, what can you do, depending on what your role is, because there's lots of different people who are going to view this, that might be teachers or board members or arts organizations and so on. What can you do to make the arts more a part of your classroom or your school or your community? And I think there's always something. And it's kind of like the more you know, the better you do, the more information you have, the more resources you have, the more you can push that forward. So one last piece I wanted to show you, And I've watched this many times over, and I really appreciate it. And it reminded me one time I was making a board presentation, and one of the board members said, if you don't think that the arts has made a difference, what if all of Luis's programs were gone tomorrow? What would that look like? And so this really shows the difference between a world without the arts and then what it looks like with the arts. And this is high school students being depicted.
There is a student named Art in every classroom across the nation, but we plucked out her voice box, stole her brushes, clipped her guitar strings, and gave her a seat in the back of the classroom. Without her, we are all separate islands, floating at sea by ourselves, alone in crowded hallways. Without her, we have no life rafts, bridges, anchors. We chew on our pencils, stare out the window, look at the clock. There is a student named Art in every classroom across the nation, and when we give her her voice back, we start to listen. She dresses in primary colors and smiles at strangers during passing period. Art plays the piccolo in her best friend's folk band. The songs they play don't have much rhythm, but still get everyone dancing. Her mouth is a garden that does not whisper thorns to anyone. She'd rather plant seeds in the palms of their hands, promises they will blossom no matter their roots. Art doesn't understand math because of its solid and straight lines. She can't fathom there being only one answer to anything. So she sketches her own equations. Poetry plus passion equals peace. She subtracts subjectivity from logic, finds that there is so much comfort in creation, beauty, in becoming the person people want to sit next to at lunchtime. Art includes everyone in the conversation. Her messages are murals on barren brick walls, hoping that all who stop to stare will take a shade of color with them. Some teachers think Art is the troublemaker, blame her for daily disruptions, doodling, and scattered attention, but Art is the reason we woke up at 6 and took 2 buses to get here, just to hear her speak in sparkle, just to learn her lesson for today. But if we close down her theaters, plunder her paint, deactivate her microphone, and unplug her voice, school becomes a silence that is perfectly intact. No one wants to be the person to break it. There is a student named Art in your classroom, your school, your district. She can be the click of comprehension, the moment you master the concept, as long as we give her the chance. Today, she writes of the world she would like to see tomorrow, a world that is colorful and warm, the perfect weather for anyone to bloom.
That's another great piece I really love. And she talks about art as self-expression and art that makes connections, which is so important, especially this year, especially going back where we need hopefulness and resilience to come back from the year that we've had. She also referenced art as the troublemaker, which I love because it's like good trouble, right? Like John Lewis said. And the reason that I got up at 6 a.m. and took 2 buses, I had twin girls that got up for 0 period for 2 years in a row, which I didn't love, but it was because they wanted to go to art class, and that's when advanced art was. So I leave you with this slide. Art is the highest form of hope, and I really strongly believe that for arts education. We need that piece in there, and we are certainly working hard in our particular area, and I would say based on my colleagues throughout the state. And I really appreciate your time being here today. Please feel free to email me if you're interested in having the slides from this presentation. I'll go ahead and stop share so that I can answer questions or be with you more personally. So let's see, full screen. There we go. All right, so that was it. I appreciate your time and you being here. The full presentation will be taped and then closed captioned and put up on our arts webinar page. Rebecca, maybe you can put that in the chat. The RCOE VAPA page, so you can find it there in just a couple weeks. Because like I said, these tend to, even if we do a small group, have a life of their own beyond the initial recording. So anyway, thank you so much. Phyllis, please email me directly and I will get that to you. And there's the website where you can find the arts webinars, the taped version, in just a couple weeks. It takes a minute to get that all done. So great to see everybody, and I will hang out here for a bit.
Lisa, we don't have the capability of turning on our video.
Yeah. Okay, let me just see. You mean turning on the camera?
Yeah, our camera's on.
I'm sorry about that. I'm in a location. I don't think it has the most updated version of Zoom, but feel free to email me. Will you put my email in the chat, please, Rebecca? So if you have a question or further discussion, I see that Margaret says, do you have any suggestions on places for supply donations? I don't personally do too much of that, and the county isn't in the business of supply donations, but I think the, oh my gosh, and somebody else can jump in. I want to say GoFundMe. There are some sites where teachers have a lot of success with that, putting up specific projects, and then donors can, or is it Donors Choose? I'm going to say Donors Choose, where donors can click through and see what the requests are and get donations. I'm just going to scroll back up here, see if I missed anything. Like I said, if you'd like a copy of the slides, go ahead and send it to me. Yes, the Talking Heads and David Byrne. We played that at my wedding. That was our walk-off song, Talking Heads song. Joy, emotion, expression, creative outlet, yeah. All right. And if you have a question, you can just unmute yourself as well. All right, well, as promised, that was short and sweet. Thank you, everybody, and I will look forward to seeing you at something in the future, I hope. And like I said, I'm here for you. Please reach out. I welcome comments, suggestions, and Rebecca will send you a survey link presently. And if you give us feedback on things you'd like to see in the future, that's really helpful to me, because I can go look for that presenter, or it's something that we can put together for you as we head back in the school. So have a great school year, everybody. Thanks for coming. Bye.